Hello, Michelle Gibson. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Guy, and I really appreciate your invitation to talk today.
I'm grateful for you coming on because as I said to you before I hit the record button, it's your work with the Earth as a huge circuit board, ultimately, that fascinates me. And you seem to have more research and knowledge and understanding of this than anybody I've come across. And I just thought it'd be fascinating for you to share what you've learned with everyone. So I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And it's really amazing how different researchers who are motivated to do their own research question the narrative and, starting to get on YouTube and, you know, breaking down the barriers of the unknown, because I know a lot of people are doing this, that just learned how to do it in order to get their work out.
Yeah.
And I know I'm one of those people. Never done anything like this in my life before.
Really?
And
So
I got my start actually blogging and making videos in June of 2018. So right on about 7 years ago
so
is
what
when I got
happened?
started. But bef I felt like I needed to get it out. I
Yeah.
started I started seeing things in the environment in 2016, or actually before that. I actually started seeing things in the environment more, especially after I moved to Oklahoma City in 2012 or 2013. I was living in Fairbanks, Alaska before that.
So
And I was always open to this information, actually
mhm.
sought it, but it wasn't until I would say 2006, 2000, 2007, 2008, somewhere in there, that a lot more of this kind of information started to become available on the internet. And, I know when I was growing up, I was born in 63. The kinds of things that were available were like books like Chariots of the Gods. Um, I think there was a movie out about Kon-Tiki, about traveling to Easter Island. There were shows like In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and Arthur C. Clarke's
Yeah.
Mysterious World
Oh, I
and
used to
Unsolved
love that.
Mysteries. You know, I did too, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was cutting edge.
And so with the internet, we had started to get access to more information. And it was right after I moved to Alaska in 2006, a couple of things happened. One was I read Graham Hancock's book called Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yes. Yes.
And that was an early introduction to this whole idea of a worldwide civilization and it, a lot of good information, but we still didn't have a lot of information about who actually built it.
Mm.
But starting to collect the puzzle pieces and waking up the fires of trying to find out who built it with, I think, a lot of people. And a friend of mine was a voracious reader during this time when I was living in Fairbanks, and she managed to get the entire library of the outgoing president of the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And there were actually a lot of alternative type books in that collection. And so I
Wow.
picked up a couple of them from the pile. It was like, oh, can I borrow this? It was like the Orion, um, Robert Bovall and Adrian Gilbert. So it was looking at the correlation between Orion's belt and the belt stars of the pyramids of Giza.
Yes.
So that was one of the
Yes.
early books that I read, and then found people like John Major Jenkins and other people that were doing alternative research along the lines of geometry in the landscape and um, correlations between ancient standing stones and stone circles and constellations. That kind of stuff was out probably first because people were looking in the direction of the ancients.
Yeah.
And and so I'm looking at all this stuff and filling my brain with information and wanting to know more.
Yeah.
And so I think I've had this passion for this hidden history like my whole life, but it's only become available recently in large quantity.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly
So it
been.
was, go
Sorry, I was
ahead, I'm
just going to
sorry.
say that's certainly for all of the evils that the internet has brought us, sharing information and the speed in which we can get information, things that we weren't privy to before, has got to be one of the good points. I think that there's a lot of negative aspects to the internet, but it's certainly opened up for people like yourself. It's opened up our the avenues that we can explore to get this information.
Absolutely. And I do think that the controllers, cabal, usurpers, globalist elite, whatever name,
Parasites.
parasites, whatever name you choose for them, because they're not human. I don't believe they're human.
No, neither do I.
I think they brought it in for control,
Mm,
but because of the nature of the internet, they lost control
mm,
because of the connectivity, not only between people, but even with the way that recommendations go out, like on YouTube.
yeah.
You know, this you might if you like this, you might be interested in this,
Yes. Yes.
and spreading it that way. And so I think a lot of things, first of all, I believe in this being a battle of good versus evil, and I believe good wins or God
Yeah.
wins, or however, again, whatever your view is on that, and that there's no way they're going to get away with what they've done.
No.
And that ultimately humanity waking up to who we are, our true history, our true power, which they're scared to death of. Hence, they've poisoned us and they've cast spells on us. They've done
Mm,
every possible thing that they could think of and more to keep us asleep, to keep us down, to keep us bound. And they still can't stop it. And my understanding about consciousness is that it's if one person goes up in consciousness, it has a collective effect.
hmm.
The work of David Hawkins and Power versus Force explains that. It doesn't take everybody to wake up. It takes enough people to wake up
Why do you think
to,
that some of us are and some of us aren't?
there could be a couple of reasons for that. Are you familiar with the term starseed?
Yes.
Dolores Cannon talks
Hmm.
about volunteers coming in to help save Earth, souls from other parts of the universe that knew what was going on and knew they needed to come in, or whatever happens here on Earth affects the future evolution of the universe. And so Earth is a very special place in the universe, I believe. And that kind of touches a little bit on what we were talking about before we started on the shape of the Earth. My research of ley lines has led me into not having an opinion to definitely having an opinion that our perception of space and time and place has been tampered with,
Hmm.
and that it's not what they tell us. It's not a spinning ball.
No, I don't believe
Um,
it is either.
Whatever the shape of the Earth is, whether it's flat or a torus, um, I would lean towards a torus because the sacred geometry aspect of it,
Hmm.
the idea of the donut,
Yeah.
constantly cycling energy. Um, but I'm very comfortable that everything is orbiting around us. So Earth would be like the center of the universe, and that the infrastructure on the Earth, the organs, the bell towers, um, everything being laid out according to frequency and vibration and perfectly placed geometrically, which gets into the concept of the circuit board that you talked about with regards to my work. That I think Earth was like sending out these healing frequencies to the universe. So what happens here, so Earth it originally was connected with everything else, and that by the destruction that happened to the grid, that I believe happened to the grid, the deconstruction of the grid itself, the destruction and deconstruction.
Mhm.
I do think it still works. And whoever did this knows that and is benefiting from it and
Any
putting it to use as
thoughts?
it was never intended for.
Any thoughts on who that or they are that did this and when that took place?
Uh, I'll touch on that because I do. But Earth is very important. I think it was the location of creation. So let's say the creator was co-creating with advanced humans what we see on the Earth, on the
Mhm.
surface of the Earth. So there was a very special relationship between a more advanced humanity, the creator, and then other uh, galactic citizens of the universe.
Yeah.
And we were all working together here, and Earth was a very special place. So it's like spirit in physical form.
Mhm.
And I believe evil saw an advantage, crashed the party, and took over everything. They had to have our consent. This is a free will zone. So they tell us in movies and in books and
Yeah.
literature, in music, they don't tell us directly, so we don't know that we're being told. But that's like their get out of jail free card.
Yeah,
Well, we told
they're
them.
trying
It's their fault.
trying to avoid karmic backlash or retribution, aren't they? It's the poisoned apple analogy that someone said to me once, that if someone sells you an apple and sells you there's poison in it and you eat it, you've killed yourself. But if they don't tell you there's poison in it, then they've killed you. So, and that's kind of what they're doing. It's like they're following some sort of universal law, or they're avoiding karma by telling us in a way in which we just dismiss it as fiction, but they've done their job.
Right. And I know that you look into the Cabbage Patch doll kids. Well,
Mm,
they gave us a doll.
yeah,
Kids play with it. Same thing
yeah,
with Raggedy Ann and Andy.
yeah,
Raggedy kids
yeah,
played with it. There's just so many ways that they have attempted to communicate to us, but it's not informed consent
no, it's not.
by any stretch of the imagination, not to mention the poisons in our food, the poisons in our air, in our clothing,
Mm,
in our, mercury fillings in our teeth if we're that old. Um, Everything, it's that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to diminish us. It may be a long-acting poison, but kill us.
mm,
They don't want higher um, human beings with who are able to question with critical thinking, higher thinking skills. They don't want that human.
yeah,
They want a controllable, messed up human. And I just see all of the social agendas that we see in today that are seemingly mystifying, especially with gender ideology and things like that, as
yes,
steps towards transhumanism, which I see as the ultimate goal for them. Siphon their energy, steal their energy, transfer our consciousness into machines, into cyborgs. Then they have a permanent source supply or chi supply, our consciousness, because they don't have what we have. And so they need that.
yeah,
And so you get into the really dirty underbelly of what they've been doing to humanity without people knowing it. Um, the you know, sacrifices and
yeah,
all the horrible things that have been going on, especially to children, but it's not just children, it's just targeting children in
yeah.
large part. So they need our energy. And
Well,
so
that's what I kind of think prisons are, because I've said this to several people. If you think about the process of going to jail, that you are charged and placed in a cell. Now, if that's not a clear explanation of taking someone's energy, I don't know what is.
you're charged when you go to the store.
Yes.
You're charged for your utility bills. Currency is money.
Yeah.
Um, I know Jordan Maxwell talked about those things years ago,
Mm,
how it shows up in our language. Birth, B BIRTH certificates
mm,
instead of BERTH certificates, and certificate of Laden or Laden when you're born, and all the ways they trick us to steal our sovereignty,
yes.
turn us into a business, which is the only way they can do anything with us because they can't touch natural humans.
Yeah, the straw man.
And yeah, exactly. And it's just a very insidious, diabolical system that they've set up here. Um, that's fake. It's all fake.
Mm,
And once people figure that out and withdraw consent and say no more, they don't have a leg to stand on. They may be scary, they may be threatening, they may still be able to hurt, but that that power is lessening, and I think we'll see it lessen more.
yeah.
Um, they still have some fangs, but people, as people wake up to our own collective power and identity, because I do believe we're all connected, we're all part of the same being.
Yes.
Um, they just never wanted that to happen because they just wanted the gravy train to go on forever and ever and ever. And they've got to pay the piper at some point. And we just get to be living in the time when we're going to see that happen.
Yeah, I
And I,
think so
I do
too.
believe that.
I think so. Sometimes I think this great reset that the World Economic Forum are pushing now that we're going through, where the 15-minute cities and 5G and digital ID and so on. I often wonder if actually this reset is about us actually raising our vibration and our frequency and walking away from them all.
I think that's where it's going. Again, it sounds scary, it seems scary, but without the events of the last few years that caused people that otherwise would not have awakened,
Mm,
especially the events of 2020.
yeah,
I know a lot of people that woke up during that time.
yeah,
They had
yeah,
time to sit at home and do their research, and it's
yeah,
like, oh boy. And so the things they've gotten away with in the past aren't going to work now. And I think whatever was meant for ill is going to be used for good.
yeah,
It was the
yeah. I think so.
internet, whether it's what's going on now with what we're seeing playing out in the world today. It's all very
Mm,
real, all very relatable, and it still looks pretty scary.
yeah,
But I know from the comments that people leave on my videos and feedback I've gotten, and I would imagine the same for yourself, especially in the cyber community, people are getting it. People are
yeah,
looking for information. Um, and we're just doing our best to get out what we're here to get out.
yeah.
And it seems to be all different things. We've all got different aspects of it that we're really keen about, but it
Yeah,
all ultimately ties together.
yes, I think so too. I often wonder if the medical intervention, because we're on YouTube, we have to be careful what we say, but the medical intervention that took place in 2020, if that changed your DNA makeup by taking that, could they technically class you as no longer a human being?
I've seen that.
Have you?
Yeah, I follow certain people on social media, most particularly X, that I've been following for several years
Hmm.
because that's pretty much where I get my news. I
Yeah,
haven't gotten mainstream news for a long time.
no, same.
Totally
Yeah,
unreliable
yeah, absolutely.
propaganda.
Mm,
You tend to get a better sense of real information in real time on social media posts.
mm,
And again, you have to be discerning with everything. So
yeah,
take everything with a grain of salt, even what we're telling you. Do your own research,
yes,
ask questions. Don't just accept blindly what you've been taught your whole life or what other people tell you. If it doesn't resonate, then, keep looking.
Yeah.
The truth is out there to find, and there has been a massive effort by the establishment to keep any kind of truth from us. They'll give us a little bit. They'll feed us drips and drabs of
Mm.
truth here and there. And it's okay for people to have an opinion, but they don't want you to have real information to form your opinion with. And they're quite happy for you to argue with people about it, about the right and the wrong of it, because that's how they stay hidden.
Yeah.
They get their energetic food from our lower states, our lower vibrational states, our lower emotional states.
Yeah.
So the more they can keep us at odds with each other, the more they benefit.
Yeah. It's
That
kind of the
stops when we stop doing that. When
it's
we
the
stop.
sort of Roman strategy of divide and conquer, isn't it? That they can just break us into groups where we disagree on certain things. And I often wonder if that was what sport was introduced for. I mean, if you look at the baseball pitch, it's a Masonic set, square, and compass, and I wonder if the idea of that is that you can have neighbors that fight over their difference of the teams they support. It's just given us something else to disagree about and fight over.
And I think it goes even deeper than that. So there's that that dichotomy that's created
Mm,
between people, even with sports and putting one team, one city against another team, another city. But I've done a lot of work with my friend Chad Williams, deeper conversations with Chad, and Chad's brilliant. Um, and in our own ways, in our own research, have explored the concept of turning us into batteries in
mm,
these in and you know getting our energy that way as
yeah,
human batteries, and that happens in sports stadiums, and Chad has done a lot of work on that. um the actually the mechanics of how they harvest energy from people in stadiums, at concerts also. My research has gone down more the lines of when they divide a country into North and South,
uh-huh,
North Vietnam, South Vietnam, North Korea, South Korea, North Yemen, South Yemen, um, to name a couple of places off the top of my head. They did it in Africa, in North Sudan, South Sudan. It's the same idea, because after, so they were colonies, and then after whichever colonial power was there, whether it be British or French or Italian or Spanish, whenever they got their independence,
uh-huh,
India, that was when all hell broke loose, chaos, because the stabilizing colonial government, which was not there for the people, it
no,
was there for the colonizing powers. They said, okay, we're going to give you your freedom. And a lot of this happened in around 1960 and the 60s. Total chaos, and then they deliberately set one against the other, North
yeah,
against the South. So different religions, typically Muslim on one and Christian on the other. Different economic systems, one doing better than the other, communist, capitalist,
yeah,
and then doing something to cause the Korean War,
yeah,
the civil wars in these countries. And it was the same idea. It was North and South. We get the poles on the battery, North and South, and causing that action to generate some kind of energy, and not good stuff. So my research has gone along those lines. And then Chad and I have talked about our work together on that as part of the same concept of this energy harvesting that's been going on. So, uh, so let me just share what got me started on my own original research and how my work developed. And it started early in 2016 when I found what I call the North American star tetrahedron.
Hmm.
So around 2007, 2008, I had moved back to Fairbanks in 2006. Um, Prior to that, I'd always been aware and I had the experiences. I had lived there prior. Um, it's a long story, but I moved back there in 2006 and started having all of these experiences that led directly to the work that I'm doing today.
Yeah.
And one of them was taking a course in the Flower of Life and learning about sacred geometry
Hmm.
and the sacred shapes of sacred geometry. And this is one of
Yeah.
them. This is called a star tetrahedron. If you ever hear the term Platonic solid, there are
Hmm.
five. That's where those come from. Is the Flower of
Right.
Life and the and sacred geometry and the shapes that come out of the Flower of Life. And so because I had learned about that, a friend of mine when I was living in Oklahoma City had given me this map. It's a bigger map, it's a world map, flat map. I put it beside my dining room table and I started noticing cities lining up in lines in North America, these faint lines here.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so then I found this shape when I connected the cities here going from Edmonton and Alberta to Ottawa and then connecting these down through here. And then I took it back up and I thought, well, maybe I wonder if I can find another one. And that was when I found this one down here. And by that time, I'd been watching these programs on like the megalithomania presentations with the earth energies and dowsers talking about these long distance alignments and going, wow, that's really neat. How is this even
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah.
And so it was based on finding this that I found my own ley lines and basically extended each of these lines out and took it around the earth. And I started out with a flat map and I had to switch to a globe because I couldn't visualize the other side of this
Sure.
map.
Yeah.
And whatever these are, this works. And I have come to the conclusion that we are on a different shaped world than what we're told with the spinning globe. But if you look at it from the perspective that that every place has a coordinate and that they can make the coordinate either a sphere or flat, and that the ley lines are real, um, everything is built out along these ley lines, and it's how I got to where I am today. All the things that I found when I was tracking these particular places,
Yeah.
and everything that fell out, the original civilization, all the infrastructure all over the earth looking the same configurations, which gets into the circuit board earth concept.
Yes.
And then I believe that got destroyed and that the New World Order guys twisted and inverted everything for that power and control that they wanted and needed for their new world. And so I think we're talking Fallen Angels. I think they're in the mix. I think Paradise Lost by John Milton was early disclosure. And they gave us a brand new narrative. I think courtesy of the Jesuits and the Freemasons,
Yeah.
um, reinvented history. And I don't think they did it from scratch. I think they took real names and real things, and then they just kind of made it the way they wanted it. And then they taught it to us. They made education mandatory in the United States, the Board of Education, like around 1850-ish, which is about the time that this reset really started to ramp up.
Yeah.
I look at the Crystal Palace exhibition in 1851 as like the official kickoff. And prior to that, they were, setting the stage.
Yeah. Getting everything ready. Yeah.
And then between 1850 and 1900, a lot happened. And then, you know, all of our history that we're taught up to a certain point, I think is completely fabricated. And then at a certain point, they wrote themselves into it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking probably sometime in the 1700s that they wrote themselves into it. That's kind of the rule of thumb that I use. Like say, let's just say before 1717, it was fabricated. After 1717, it was them in it
Yeah.
and giving us explanations. I picked 1717. That was the year that the Premier Grand Lodge of England was formed. That was the year that the Anna Lucis was adopted by the Premier Grand Lodge. And that was the year that's the midpoint year of between 1492 and 1942, which I've identified as the timeline that was overlaid over the Earth's original history, and
Yes.
that negative beings, whether reptilians or archons or whoever, um, all working together on this, in, excuse me, infiltrated the Masonic lodges. The Moorish Masons were the builders of this civilization. They took their identity, took credit for everything that they built, and and taught us that's who did it. And so we've been, we basically all of us have been lied to. And then they've used race and religion and all these other things to divide humanity and,
Yeah.
create
Yeah.
ungodly messes, which we still see playing out today. I mean, the whole Israel thing was a Rothschild
Yes.
invention.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think organized religion came in with the hijack. Um, what Islam was originally is not what we see today. That's a hard sell because of how bad it is, how it's been radicalized and horrible, horrible things happening. Um, but that's all been manipulated. Everything's been manipulated
Mm.
because they have to keep us in fear, they have to keep us
Yes,
in
they do.
confusion, and 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 they need that in order to get away with it.
How do you
So there's
think?
a huge, I'll just finish the thought and then go ahead. There's a huge spiritual growth that's incumbent on humanity to rise up in consciousness, which is actually becoming heart-based and not mind-based, and moving into a vibration of love and not this division
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
been foisted on us.
I totally agree. I think John Lennon said it, all we need is love. And it's so powerful. And I think it's the one thing that people, anybody out there would be prepared to die for love. I mean, you can pay a mercenary to go and fight, but ultimately, the one thing that would make everybody stand up and fight would be love. I think it's more powerful than money, more powerful than fear. It's more powerful than anything. And what I was going to ask you was, how do you believe they harness this energy?
So all of the original infrastructure on the grid system, which would have been part of this free energy system that was worldwide, that was for the benefit of all life everywhere. All of the buildings they say the controllers say they built
Mm,
was already there and part of this energy grid. And
yeah,
so the schools, the churches, the museums, the theaters, the old theaters, prisons, like I mentioned, which a lot of them look like they're star forts, which I
yes,
think were batteries. They had the name battery in a lot of places. I think that's what they were.
yeah. A lot of
There's
military
usually more
forts.
than one of
Yeah.
them. Yep.
Mm,
A lot of more than one of them, and that's the definition of battery too.
mm,
Um, more than one star fort in a given area. So like
yeah,
if you find one, there's usually another one or a history of another one or even more than that.
yeah,
And I think a lot of the wars were to destroy them and then give them a reason for having been built
yeah,
because we've been given the military fortification reason. Um, so so they're harnessing our energy in these buildings, in the schools, the public schools, which are indoctrination centers, in the theaters, in the churches, all of the stuff that the steeples, a lot of which have been removed, but all of that would probably still be harvested through the grid somehow, what's left of it. And I do think it still works. And my friend Chad and I did a talk not too long ago about the idea of they inverted the hologram, and somehow the Saturn moon matrix is involved in this. And so the are you familiar with the squatter man image, the stick man figure?
Yes.
So drawing on the idea that that's like a universal hologram, let's say
Hmm.
for how things work,
Yeah.
how things are all the same. And Chad did a lot of work on finding mirrored this horrible looking demonic head, and that's found in everything. And so the idea that they might have used like a holographic kind of technology to superimpose the original Squatter Man, Stick Man figure with this Baphomet demonic looking image. And that somehow they've reworked everything so this energy is being harvested and going somewhere else
Yeah.
to whatever inorganic parasites need it.
Hmm.
Um, and I do believe that's what's been going on. I think they destroyed the grid and then they just, reconfigured it for what their needs were.
Yeah.
And, whether it was energy like that or power or whatever they needed until they needed it and then they destroyed it, or destroyed it when it became inconvenient for the narrative. So like all of this rail infrastructure was in place like in the early, or let's say late 1800s, early 1900s. You had streetcars all over the place. You had
Yeah.
railroad all over the place. There's still they still use the railroad for freight, some passenger service, but they've taken a lot of the rail out and then they've paved it and turned it into roads. And
Yeah.
this is part of the grid. So anything that's going over the pavement is connected to this grid.
Yeah.
Cars, pedestrians, they took it out, and we don't question that they took it out. Why would you go through the effort of building all of these electric streetcars that were super sophisticated and only use them maybe for 40 years, if that,
Yeah.
40, 50 years? And then they got bombed in the war, like in Manila. Manila had a
Mm.
very sophisticated streetcar system that got taken out. Hanoi, um, it was all the same everywhere. And so to get back to my work and how I started to develop that whole belief and provide evidence for the circuit board Earth idea was I found these cities and places in alignment, working with that, wrote everything down in spreadsheets all over the Earth, and I got a bunch of these, so I won't go through them all. And then when I started blogging in 2018, with a few exceptions, I started going from place to place on these alignments that I found from working from the spreadsheets. And so I had a whole bunch of data collected from these data points,
Yeah.
and a bigger picture started to unfold. And so I did all of this first. And these videos are good. This was early on in my YouTube career.
Yeah.
And so I don't have as many views for some of these earlier ones, but it's still very interesting if you like that kind of thing. And then I started to pull together into a bigger picture what I was finding from these place-to-place videos, long distances around the world. And so when I was talking about the ancient and modern evidence for the perfect alignment of heaven and earth worldwide, it'll take just a second to come up.
Yeah. No problem.
Um, I went back to examples of some of the most ancient that, that are being called natural. Um, some of my earlier pictures
Mm,
aren't showing up here. I'll go into a few more examples of that, but this is from a megalithomania presentation that I watched. Peter Knight was talking about the Avebury complex, and he was talking about so it was the Glastonbury Megalithomania Conference in 2011 that I saw
right.
this.
Yeah.
And so he was showing all of this geometry
Mm,
from ancient times. It's like, again, how is this even possible?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And how everything lines up with the different. So, like in the Avebury complex, there's a lot of different things like the West Kennet Long Barrow and the Silbury Hill and a lot of smaller ones. We've got here East Kennet Long Barrow, Windmill Hill, the Avebury standing stones in the middle. But he was showing how all of these things were lining up with each other perfectly,
Yeah.
perfectly. But not only with what's on the ground, but also with the solstices
Yes.
and what you see on the day of the winter solstice from the West Kennet Longborough going perfectly through the center stone and hitting the stone at the back.
Mm,
So this is my earliest introduction to how I got drawn into all of this. I was seeing things like this, and it's all lining up perfectly geometrically, and then it lines up with the heavens on the
yeah.
inside of this, like the West Kennet Long Barrow. So, where you can see the equinox moonrise from one of the windows, and then you can see the Pleiades. Not very clear in the picture, but the Pleiades from inside the Long Barrow. And this is supposed to be 5,500 years old
Yeah.
and contemporaneous with what's called the Watson Brake lunar mounds near Monroe, Louisiana, which about the same time as Avebury, and they're the oldest earthwork mound complex in North America that's recognized at 5,400 years old. So all of these things are happening around the same time, and it's like
Yes. Yes. That's the thing, isn't it?
Howard Crowhurst's work is excellent, and I saw his presentations on megalithomania and what he was finding in France and Brittany at the Karnak stones. And then, you know, from the time that I've been doing research on these ley lines, I'm finding things like this bridge. It's called the Manhattan Bridge in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
And you can see that's perfectly framed in the bridge. Now, I said Empire State Building. It might be the Chrysler Building. It's one of the two. Um, I've got a lot of information in here. So you've got this is in Big Sur in California. You've got Keyhole Rock at Pfeiffer Beach, and you've got this going on during the probably one of the solstices.
Hmm.
Yeah, the winter solstice. And you see the same thing at the Monument Rocks National Monument in
Wow.
Kansas.
Yeah.
I call it natural. Different examples from the same place in Kansas. Durdle Door in Lulworth, England, and Dorset. Same thing on the winter solstice. This is Arches National Park in Utah, where there's 2,000 natural
Hmm.
stone arches, but there's one like this that frame in the background perfectly. So these are some of the older examples of what I found, but you get into so-called modern architecture. So this is the Palace of the Kings of Majorca and Perpignan
Yeah.
in southern France, where you've got the arch framing. the building perfectly in Gijón, Spain at the university there, same idea. This is in Seville. It's actually called Moorish architecture. Alhambra, Oxford University in England, um, Elizabeth Tower at the Palace of Westminster through that arch. The Eiffel Towers in Paris through that location, and you can also see the Eiffel Tower, the Eiffel Tower's archway perfectly framing the military school. In Bavaria, the Fisherman's Bastion in Budapest, Hungary. You see the Hungarian Parliament building framed
Oh
perfectly through the
wow, look at
archways.
that. I mean that one's incredible, isn't it?
This is everywhere.
And it's the same buildings. We're always looking at the same domed
It's
buildings, aren't we?
it's not it's not random.
No, it's not random.
Ethiopia,
Yeah.
Petra in Jordan, in
Mm,
Iran. And I'm just and these are all examples
mm,
that I pulled from researching ley lines.
yeah.
It's like they're hiding something very special from us.
Yes. Oh wow.
And and then when I learned about the Moors and the Moorish paradigm, suddenly it made sense. And so from the time that I started doing my research in 2018, I met my Moorish friend in 2013, learned about sacred geometry, learned about ley lines, and then
Hmm.
I've looked at everything through the lens of the Moorish paradigm, and it makes sense. And
Yeah.
nothing else makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the idea that this was destroyed, and I don't think what we see on the surface of the earth today was like that prior to the energy grid being destroyed. And it sank the land, it sank, I mean, it caused marshes and deserts and dunes all
Yeah.
across the surface of the earth. And I think that's why we have star forts in the middle of the water and lighthouses in the middle of the water and railroad tracks right beside the edge of land. I think the energy grid was destroyed and the land, with the power of this, caused the land to sink around these components of the energy grid. And that the
What do you
stories that they tell of us is this was built for the War of 1812 or this was built in
mm,
1857 because they were afraid that the Emperor Napoleon III of France was going to come and invade the British Isles. So they built all of these Palmerston forts and things like that. They didn't.
yeah,
They
I
just
totally
so we got
agree.
to explain this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. How do you think they managed to collapse everything?
So one of the bases of what I think happened relates to the Philadelphia experiment.
Okay.
Aleister Crowley was involved in that, and I think he's part of the mix. And an occult ceremonial ritual. I think that was one aspect of it, and I think that caused a non-resonant frequency to go through the grid system. And there's a tall bell tower. It would have gone. He supposedly did a ceremony at Manantol on the day of the Philadelphia experiment, where he passed his son through the circular megalith there, and that caused a line of rough energy to cross. It would have hit this granite bell tower that rings like a bell. I think that inserted a resonant frequency, which would have destroyed all of the perfectly resonant infrastructure, all the organs and all the bells and all this stuff that was all perfectly tuned.
Yeah.
You can find videos on YouTube showing that if you insert a non-resonant frequency, it will like shatter a wine glass or cause structural failure in bridges, things like that. So they do destroy, but I don't think that was the only one. That's the one I'm looking at causing the time manipulation, a lot of weirdness around time. And I think it brought in the crazy social agendas that
Hmm.
I mentioned. And that was very much part of what he talked about. He talked about Baphomet and Saturn and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, and he was into that kind of thing,
Yeah.
going both ways, as they say.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of it, and that he was used by these demonic forces to do what he did and bring them in. And I have done research on all of this, so I've got a lot of information documented in my blog posts and videos. But I also think it was more than that. I think there were directed energy attacks on the grid
Yes, I
because
keep
there's
thinking that
just
too.
so much devastation. So you've got all
Mm,
the deserts in North Africa, South Africa, China, all the way up from, let's say, the Sahara through the Middle East, through Yemen and Iran and Iraq, on up to on up until southern Siberia, where it turns green again, is all desert
mm,
and blown out. And I think this caused the pyramids, I mean, not the pyramids, I think this caused the, the land surface of the earth to sink, and that any continental drift, which is the explanation we're given, that this has been happening over millions of years, was is caused by these continents that are loose now
hmm.
that weren't before because the surface was destroyed. And again, I'm accumulating evidence for this.
Yeah.
So, done quite a bit of research on it, and it's not just one or two examples I'm talking about. It's like a lot of examples. And when you look under the water, there's a lot of information there. When you look at estuaries, the ones in Britain, the ones all over, same story. Um, in my mind, that's ruined land. And again, pulling the evidence for that from what's available to find. Um, so for example, on in Mumbles in Wales,
Yeah.
um, historically there was mussels and oysters and things like that. There was a big during the Victorian era, they were
Yeah.
harvesting all these mussels. Well, they grow on infrastructure. That's the first example that comes to the top of my head. But there are these places that have these estuaries, and they're deep. They don't go very deep. They're brackish. And again, the story we're told is it's all natural. And I've done quite a bit of work around estuary, looking at estuaries, and there's a lot of anomalies in there,
Do you
wetlands and
think
things like that.
do you think that this is connected, that what happened if they were using direct energy weapons, that this is connected to what we believe to be melted buildings, the whole meltology, that we're seeing a lot of now? Do you think that that's what happened?
I think it's all in there, and
Mm,
it not only melted buildings, it did a lot of stuff, did a lot of
mm,
damage. But even the explosion of the grid, this
mm,
destruction of the energy grid could have caused a lot of that, but it could have been the
yeah.
weapons. Um, where I live in Arizona, first of all, I think there was a lot of giant trees around where I live,
Yes. Yes.
but the surface of the earth is like it's like it's like that.
Mm,
And there are these Victorian homes built on top of these hills with gigantic rocks on
mm,
top of it. I mean, this place is clearly mud flooded, and I only use that as a word that's commonly used to explain
yeah.
whatever happened.
Yeah.
It was, I think whatever the mud flood was the result of a number of causes. I think the destruction of the giant trees could have caused pyroclastic flows and eruption columns of volcanic ash that would have had that effect.
Hmm.
So I think when the grid was destroyed, the giant trees were part of the grid and gave us the volcanoes that we see today.
Yes.
Some were used, so they were part of the grid system, but the ancients terraformed some of these trees because you can see like star forts and palaces and things on top of what look like tree stumps.
Yes.
Um, So there's a couple of different classifications that I see. One is terraformed giant trees, but I look at volcanoes as used to be giant trees.
Yeah.
And then when you look at a lot of the islands that were claimed by the European colonial powers in the middle of nowhere, and they still fight over them.
Mm,
If you look at them, they look like giant tree stumps.
mm.
Tristan da Cunha, if you look at that, it's off the coast of South. So it's on the way. So if you go down the coast of West Africa and go around the Horn of Africa and come back
Yeah.
up towards Asia, India, Asia, all that area in there, it's it's below. I guess it's below in the waters below um, South Africa. There's
Right.
several islands in there. Tristan
Yeah.
da Cunha is one, um, and then St. Helena is another one. And Ascension Island is another one.
Right.
Um, Ascension Island is basically claimed by the military,
Mm,
or for purposes of listening and all these things going on this little
mm.
little island. Um, Again, I think the land sank, and there were certain places. It's like they knew where to go after this took place, and they made a beeline for it. And then all
Yeah.
these different countries started colonizing, I mean, claiming these lands as colonies, and brought us the world that we live in today, which is not a fun place. I mean, it's a wonderful place. I love being alive. I think we're very blessed with miracles every day, considering everything that's happened. But the pain and the suffering and the
Yeah.
war and all of the things that have happened are it's not natural, and it's not our natural state of being. I don't think we would be at war with each other or fighting each other or prejudiced against each other
Mm.
if that wasn't being manipulated.
It's they
I
enjoy
don't
it,
think
don't they? It's something that I think that it serves war serves several purposes. I think it's an opportunity to destroy architecture that they don't have a brilliant backstory to, or they want shot of. But it's also a brilliant way of depopulating. But I think that there's pleasure from it. I think that they take immense pleasure from watching us kill each other.
I do too, unfortunately. And it's
Mm.
it's hard to say that or believe it, but they are cruel.
Oh, absolutely.
They're
Absolutely.
absolutely cruel.
Mm.
And and they don't care.
No, they don't.
They don't care about the lost lives. Um, when they set up their false flags, there's one that comes to mind, the shooting that took place in Las Vegas. I think it was in 2017, 2018. Uh, the name of the shooter was Paddock, Paddock, which is affiliated with sheep.
Hmm.
That's what I can think of off the top of my head. But there were a
Yeah.
lot of allusions within that, how that was set up,
Yeah.
that were very mocking. And that's multiplied by everything that's happened,
Yeah.
that they've been behind, all of the things that they've done to keep people in fear and terror of what's going to happen next, when it just happens seemingly at random places. But you
Yeah.
know that they're false flags and being done deliberately.
I kind of often think that with Napoleon Bonaparte. What a
Yes.
brilliant name. Yeah, it's perfect, isn't it? And then I don't know if you know, but I sort of did some digging into the Napoleonic Wars, and it looks like that we ate the bodies indirectly. A lot of the bodies were used as fertilizer for crops back here in Britain. The dead bodies were used as fertilizer, so we were eating them, and then using their teeth. Waterloo teeth became uh, prized dentures at the time. So we were sort of eating with the teeth of the deceased that fell in battle to eat produce that was grown through the dead bodies of the people that fell as well, I think. And then, add that into the mix, the possibility that bone china was being used from the remains of human bones. We're kind of using their teeth, eating off their bones, and eating produce grown through their dead bodies. I mean,
Yep.
they had the last laugh several times.
Yep. Yet that can be broken down into several parts because yes, and not just whoever's remains were being processed that way, because
Mm,
I see that as being part of the cover up of this
mm,
whole original civilization.
yeah.
Whether the bones of the people that were killed in the cataclysm, and I think they were much bigger than we
Yes,
are,
I do too. Yeah.
um, because I just see all of that as a cover, the whole Napoleonic thing. I just tracked a pyramid alignment from the Quetzalcoatl Pyramid in Mexico to the Great Pyramid of Giza. And the last leg of that was where the alignment entered southern France and went on to the Great Pyramid. And it passes right through the Mediterranean. And
Right.
Napoleon was all over the Mediterranean.
Mm,
And I think if you break down Mediterranean, it's Middle Earth.
yeah.
And so I think that was Middle Earth. There was land there, and that
Yeah.
sank. And that so Rothschild, Mayor Amschel Rothschild,
Hmm.
incarnated in 1744. I've identified the Great Frost of Ireland of 1740, 1741 as possibly being a rip in the fabric of space-time caused by the Philadelphia experiment. And then right after that happened, Mayor Amschel was born. 44. In 1748, Adam Weishaupt was born, and
Hmm.
he was the founder of the Bavarian Order
Illuminati.
of the
Yeah.
Illuminati. And then 2 years after that, in 1750, Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld was born, and it was through his lineage that the royal houses of Europe were replaced.
Mm.
The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, aka
Yeah. Well, we know
Windsor.
them well. Yes. Yeah.
But it was also other royal houses. So,
Mm.
a lot of leaders got replaced through Victoria and Albert's line, but there were also other marriages in that Saxe-Coburg and Gotha ducal lineage, Portugal, Belgium, um, Mexico, and so I think I'm comfortable with calling them reptiles. I don't have any problem with that.
Mm.
Um, so I think those guys came in right after the Great Frost of Ireland. I think the Great Frost of Ireland could have been the result of a rip in the fabric of space-time, which allowed these guys in. And they were major players in the reset. And so it wasn't long after Mayor Amschel Rothschild came in, established the banking family out of
Mm.
Frankfurt, and then his sons went to different places. Nathan went to London around
Yeah.
1800. Solomon, Joseph, I guess I better not try to name them all, but they all went to different major
Yeah.
cities and established the Rothschild banking dynasty. And there was a lot going on during the Napoleonic Wars, um, speculating and making money off
Yeah.
of the war. And then, just evidence has been documented by other people that they were behind like the Civil War and other wars as well,
Oh, absolutely.
just
Yeah. I mean, the First
constantly
World War,
seeding that.
yeah, it was the Rothschilds behind the First World War, and they funded Cecil Rhodes and the Society of the Elect to, start this propaganda machine to, declare war on Germany at a time when it looked like they were going to become a superpower and they wanted to crush them. And I've looked into that quite extensively, and that the Rothschilds have often funded both sides of the wars.
And all of the elite families, the DuPonts, the Astors,
Oh, yeah.
the best, the Rockefellers,
Mm,
it was a conspiracy. And then they had to create all of this anti-truther
yeah.
labels like conspiracy theorist when it is absolutely a conspiracy
Yeah.
and accuse others of what they're doing, part of the rules for radicals. Um, and they've used it very effectively
Mm.
until they brought in the internet.
Now you
Sorry
refer to them.
guys.
You refer to them as reptiles, and my wife does as well, and most people do. But what do you mean when you say that? Because obviously, you know, I mean, he's dead now, apparently. But if Jacob Rothschild walks in here now, apart from having a slightly elongated skull, he kind of looks like the rest of us. What do you mean by reptile?
Um, reptilians.
Yeah, but
Um,
I mean the difference
you know, I
between
there's so it gets confused. I mean, this is not an area of expertise from of mine. Um, Along the education that I received, learning about how dark the dark was, I did encounter David Icke's work on the reptilians and the
yeah,
pedophilia problem.
mhm,
And to my mind, the pedophilia is not connected with sex, it's connected with energy, that they want the energy of these children, and that
yeah,
it's a huge, huge problem, especially with the upper echelon
mhm,
of government, of these
yes,
families, of the human trafficking and child trafficking that is on an industrial scale, um, is for these children. They
mhm,
need these children, the adrenochrome and all the other
yes,
things that they depend on. They have, blood transfusion
yes,
sites set up for young. So they have these anti-aging things that they use from living human beings.
mm,
This is not perpetrated by humans.
mm,
Maybe they're like shapeshifters or masks. I know you talk about clones. It's like they're disguising themselves.
mm.
Because if they look like reptiles, we sure as heck we'd
No,
know.
yeah,
Um, but I don't think they're the only ones. I mean, I think this is like an unholy alliance of whatever negative beings need this energy, want this power and control. Um, and these technologies exist to keep them disguised so we don't know that they're not human.
mm,
And so I became familiar with that idea from David's work. Though it took me about 10 years to go like, oh yeah.
yeah,
But um also Richard Smith goes by UFO teacher and some other things. He's done some work on the extraterrestrial aspect. They're not supposed to do what they're doing. You would think by universal law they wouldn't be
hmm,
allowed, but it's happened anyway. And maybe
mm,
it's happened for our better, for our growth, that we had to hit rock bottom and know
yes,
what rock bottom was and be
mm,
able to recognize the evil consciously in order to be able to grow and evolve and say, no, we're not going to do this again.
mm,
When I first started doing this work, I really believed that. Now I'm not, I'm not exactly sure if this is ever going to happen again.
yeah,
But in order for us to move forward now, we need to step up, accept some things that may not be comfortable. Again, question the narrative, question what we're told. Because when you start looking at the details of what they tell us and what they've always taught us, it makes no sense.
no,
And if you, I'm going to share my screen again. So if you look at the coat of arms of the House of Saxe, Coburg and Gotha, it's interesting because you have a little bit of what might be a clue. I mean, maybe it's not, maybe it is, but you see what looks like a tail
hmm,
with spikes on it.
yeah,
It's in different places. Um, and again, they have to tell us who they are. Okay, so this is the House of Braganza, I believe, right here.
mm,
So, Saxe-Coburg, Gotha, da, da. Okay, yeah. So this is the House of Braganza is Portugal, and this is one of the houses that the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha married into. And you have these figures here. Um, that look kind of dragon-like. They have their little tail
Yes.
here.
Hmm.
And then if you look up wyvern,
Yeah.
um, they're not very nice. They're considered not very nice dragons, but
Mm.
they're in a lot of the symbols. Um, sorry, my brains. So it's basically a mean dragon, kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're vicious. And to me, that really describes what we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm seeing something that's not there, but
I don't think so.
but that could very well be an indication. And I don't believe they're human. I don't believe they're from here. I do believe they feed on children and and human energy. And
Well, we had a very famous TV presenter and radio DJ that was called the Fixer, who was delivering them on a silver platter to Buck's house. Um,
Jimmy Savile,
yeah,
or
yeah,
is it a different one?
Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was a nasty piece of work, wasn't he?
yeah, yeah, and of course, Ignited, wasn't he? He was Charles's advisor. He was giving him advice on his marriage. He was giving them advice on speeches and all sorts of things. And you can see why, can't you? Because he was providing a non-stop supply of children.
Right. Again, it's unbelievable. We haven't been told about this. It's swept under the rug. It's actively suppressed,
Mm,
but it's there to find, and it's
yeah,
been there for
yeah,
ages.
mm,
But the people that bring it forward, tend to get blacklisted. And there was a in so let's say Church of Canada, something like that. Kevin Annett,
hmm.
years and years ago, this is before I started doing my own research, talked about the missing children at these residential
Ah,
schools
yes,
in this in
yes.
British Columbia.
Hmm.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, we don't do that. These things are even happening today. It's like, no,
Mm,
no, no connection to Epstein. No, 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 that's not
yeah.
us. This that's all they do is
Mm,
denial and projection, and it's like everything to keep it off of them. The problem
yeah.
is it just keeps piling up.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously the Canadian incident with the orphans was directly linked back to a visit from the royal family.
Yeah, yeah, that was one of the things that comes up right
Yeah,
along with it.
and I think with people that are interested, if anybody watching this is interested in what went on with Epstein, the person they need to be looking at is Sir Richard Branson. That man owns the islands all around Epstein's, and
Yes.
he also owns all of the private abortion clinics in Britain. And of course he has the red woman as his logo, and his company's called Virgin. The clues are there. You've just got to have a little dig, and you'll find everything you need to by looking at that particular person. They're normally
Yeah.
knighted.
Yep. It's like, to me, this whole realm is about energy.
Yeah.
It's about the original energy, the source energy, the
Mm,
co-creating wonderful, beautiful things, and all of these tremendous achievements, technological and otherwise. The ancient advanced civilization, which is, as far as I'm concerned, it's the same as Atlantis, and Atlantis sank recently. And then everything else since then's been a cover up, and using this technology in a negative way, and
mm,
also using it for harvesting our energy and
mm,
creating these child trafficking networks because of what we're just talking about. They need that, crave that, want that. That's their thing.
yes, yes,
And there's going to be a segment of people that already know this. This has been out there for a long time.
mm,
And there may be people that this is new to. But that's the bottom line reality, is that this world's not what we've been told. We're more powerful than we can even imagine
mm,
because we've basically been told we're nothing in the scheme of things.
yeah,
And that these evil, nasty beings found a way in and proceeded to create a new world that worked for them, that they needed for their
mm,
purposes,
mm,
with the ultimate end goal of not needing us anymore.
yeah,
And that would be by creating an artificial synthetic endless
absolutely,
supply of our energy utilizing man-machine interface
yeah,
cyborgs or whatever they had planned. And
yeah,
they
I
got
totally
far
agree.
into it, but I believe with all my heart we're watching their end. And maybe it's not happening as quickly as we'd like, but as people keep waking up, it's really game over for them.
Yeah, I think so too. I do agree. People keep saying to me that, what can we do, and what's the point in anything, and you know, in the end, we're just going to suffer, and then we're going to die. And I said, no, no. I mean, first of all, stop complying. Turn your TV off. Stop reading the news. Don't participate. Boycott everything, and understand that these people that arrive in cars with blue flashing lights, in fancy dress costumes, have no authority over you. Nobody has any authority over you. You're sovereign. And the problem is that I keep saying the same old stuff to people, that it's like half of the world has Stockholm syndrome. They actually want to be in control, but ultimately they're always looking for somebody else to help them, or to guide them. They're saying, well, who's going to help me? I can't do this on my. They kind of want help from the very people they despise. So they need the system to enable them to function, but they hate the system. They don't want to be part of it. And I think you've just got to get to the point where you say enough is enough. I'm walking away, and I'm no longer participating. I do not. I have. I do not have a royal family. I do not live in the United Kingdom. My name isn't Mister Guy Anderson. That's a military term. My name's Guy Anderson. It's that my family surname's Anderson. My name is Guy. I do not recognise the government. I do not recognise the royal family. And if someone's been knighted, I certainly wouldn't address them as sir. It means nothing to me. These are all. It's all a game. It's a stage, with actors upon it, um, pushing their agenda, trying to make us subservient. And I think that the moment that we stop respecting that or acknowledging it, then that's the beginning of their demise. But so many people still want to participate. I get told all the time that, by people, oh, um, you should give your information away for free. So the books that you write, you should give them away for free. And I said, well, unfortunately, I do have to live in the system, so I can afford to function. Because if I don't, you know, if I print this stuff for free, then where am I getting the money from to buy the ink or the paper? And how do I post it to you without using the Royal Mail? So as much as I don't want to be in the system, we're kind of stuck with it. But that doesn't mean I have to participate. So I don't vote. I don't recognize authority, because I'm sovereign. But I think we're very close to getting to a point where it'll collapse. And then perhaps we can get things back to how they were. We're all intelligent enough, you would think, by now to know right from wrong and not have to be hit over the head for doing 5 miles an hour over the speed limit at 3 o'clock in the morning and on a road where there's no traffic, or parking for 5 minutes longer than we'd paid for and being punished for it. I think enough's enough. We're treated like children, and it's got to stop. But I think in order for it to stop, we have to stand up and say we're no longer accepting it. We're no longer standing for it. So it kind of, the change starts with us. I think that was a long-winded way of saying
Yeah,
that. The change that people are looking for comes from within.
exactly. And another thing that, besides we're the ones we're looking for is, if not me, who, if not now,
Mm,
when.
yeah.
And when I started receiving and understanding this information and started blogging in June of 2018, it's like I have to get this out. And I felt like it's important for people to at least have a different thing to consider,
Mm,
and um, taught myself how to do it. I'm I'm a very shy person. I, I, being a speaker, being a public kind of person now, is not really in my comfort zone, but I do it because I feel like it
I
needs
know
to be done.
exactly what you mean, Michelle.
And I will keep doing it as long
Yeah.
as humanly possible because it needs to be done. And every time I go down the rabbit hole, I find more and more,
Mm,
and it actually gets stranger and stranger. But
yeah, it does.
um, it's like when you have a mission, the universe conspires to help you. And
Yes.
that's been the case in my situation. And the more you look, the more you get in return. So it's like whatever each person is guided to do in whatever aspect of this research, because there's more than enough to go around.
Mm,
Um, it's like very, well, first of all, it's very rewarding, but the more you do it, the more you get in return of
I
whatever
think so. I
you're
believe in the
interested
law
in.
of returns.
And that the universe wants this information to come back because
Mm,
it's been completely removed from our
mm,
awareness. And we've been given bread and circuses to entertain us, and breadcrumbs so that we can live
yes.
within their system
Mm,
to pay taxes or whatever else.
yeah.
Ultimately, it benefits the people that gave us the system.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for giving up your time. I know you've got to do a vet run in a moment, haven't you?
yeah, just about an hour, a little less than an hour. But they came into my life last Wednesday, a senior pair,
Oh,
and I just want to get them checked out and make sure everything's looking good with them. I think it is, but it seems better to get established with the vet sooner rather than later.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I'm a dog person myself, and I've taken in dogs before. I've rescued a staffy and rehomed it a few years back, and there's just something about, I don't know, there's something about dogs. I have this feeling that inside them there's a person, and I
I'm
can't
with you.
help it. There's just something there, and I don't know
They
what it
they
is.
they know exactly what's going on. Dogs, cats, other animals,
Yeah,
they're conscious. They are
and
conscious like we are. They just don't communicate like we do.
you can tell, can't you? I mean, I watch my dogs over the years. I've watched them with people that have come into our home, and the ones that they immediately go up to and make a fuss of, they can sense that that's a good person. And the ones that they avoid, and the people that avoid them, I have to be wary of. They've got brilliant
Yeah.
senses. They can detect a good from a bad person, bloody mile away, I think.
Yeah, and I think they have spiritual gifts too that help us,
Yes.
whether they can see things we
Yeah.
can't, or, are sensitive to frequencies and,
Mm,
can provide healing that way. Cats, purrs, things like that. And I know dogs have spiritual gifts, and similarly speaking. So, and they teach us about unconditional love.
yes.
Um, so anyway, I'm just pleased. I had a companion cat of 16, almost 16 years that passed away earlier this year. And
Oh,
I just adopted these guys last week, so I missed the presence,
yeah,
the animal companion presence
I know
very
that
much.
one. Yeah, we lost. Well, he was closest to me. We lost one of our dogs. We'd had him 13 years, and 1 minute he was fine. The next minute he was struggling to breathe, and I rang the vets, got him into the car, and he died within 5 minutes. So I'm glad that he didn't suffer, but I wasn't ready, and I think he deserved another year or two. But there we go. But his little brother's asleep by my feet right now, so at least he lives on. He lives on in in him. So that's something,
Yep.
isn't it?
Yep. I know, just saying, I don't think we're never ready.
No.
And I wish they lived as long as we did.
Yeah, I think they deserve to live longer. But yeah, I totally agree. But thank you again, Michelle, for your time. Thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you for
Takes
all the
each
work you're
takes
doing.
takes each of us, and it just I think it'll just keep coming in um and growing exponentially as more truth keeps coming out from different people.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to snowball. Yeah, I
And I
really
know
do.
tell people if I can do this, anybody can do this
Well, I
when it
wouldn't go
comes
that
to no experience.
far. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like I
Well,
gotta get this out.
so
How am I gonna
same
do
with
this?
me. 1 minute I'm a graphic designer and I'm designing tattoos for people, and the next minute I'm writing books, and I didn't see that coming, but I had to get the information down. Even if no one bought it, I had to get it out of my head. And the boxes of notepads and notebooks that I've got, I had to write it all down into some sort of order. Even if no one ever bought it, at least it was down. And then I could pass it to my children and they could pass it to their children. So they could see what had happened and recognize it if it happens again. And that was kind of my idea, but now I just can't stop writing.
Yep, yep, yep. And
Anyway,
I get it. I mean, it's like I had to get it out. I don't care if it's 5 people or 50 or 500 or 5,000. I don't care. I just want to
well,
get it out and let the internet do its work,
yeah,
finding people that are ready for it. Because
yeah,
I
that's
certainly can't
it.
talk to this about my family. I mean,
Hmm.
non-starter. Most
Yeah,
people I know I can't talk to about this.
yeah, I
I think
know that
maybe
one.
two,
I fell out with a
two in
lot
my
of
life that I
people.
know right now that I can physically go next door or meet for coffee and talk. Two.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. There is actually nobody that I could physically go and talk to about any of this stuff. And when I started talking about 5G in early 2020, that something didn't stack up. First of all, I had friends saying that I should buy a tinfoil hat or wear a tinfoil hat. And I was a conspiracy theorist. I was nuts. They wanted to know what drugs I was taking and where they could get them from. And that spiraled into being banned from Facebook. I kept putting the information out. I was banned from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I was slowly removed from everywhere and had to start all over again. But this time without the people that didn't want to hear what I was saying, and I just built it back up again with people that resonate and are
Mhm.
ready. And I said this to Max Egan a few years ago. I said, I'm banging my head off a wall. No one's listening to me. And he said, brother, if you can wake one person up, you might just have saved a life. And I figured that
Yeah,
was a good enough reason to keep going. So
I'm glad you did.
I'm glad that you'll do what you do as well. Anyway, thank you once again, Michelle. And the next time, well, maybe before, but the next time I speak to you or see you on a screen with me on it as well will be the Tartarian conference. So, yeah, looking
Absolutely.
forward
In
to that.
little less than 2 weeks now.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant.
So
Well,
that'll be
thank you.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm
You're
looking forward
welcome.
to it.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you. And enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of your day. Thank you too. All the best, Michelle.
All right. You too, Guy.
Bye for
You take
now.
care. All
And
right.
you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.